And joining me now from West Palm Beach, Florida, where President Trump is spending his day, is NBC News White House correspondent Vaughn Hillyard. Also with me is NBC News Justice correspondent Reilly and NBC News Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley. So thank you all for being here. Vaughn, let's start with the resignations at the FDA and Social Security Administration. Why are these top people leaving?
Right, Yamiche. For the Social Security Administration, this is the top official here who oversees the system that pays out 70 million Americans their Social Security disbursements. And this official ultimately resigning after DOGE employees attempted to access and sought access of the personnel data. This is data that extends from bank account information, Social Security information, but also in the case for individuals who have applied for disability, medical information about millions of Americans. And that is what led to this official here resigning. And it's notable that you mentioned that 2023 IG report, and there's the 2024 IG report, Inspector Generals from the Social Security Administration, that said that while there were 20 million Americans over the age of 100 that were still on the rolls, still within the Social Security Administration system, almost zero, the words of the Inspector General, were still actually receiving payments here. And as for the FDA, we are still waiting for exact word why the head of the Food Division stepped aside. But the Trump administration, in response, said that they are looking for individuals to fill out these administrative roles who are clearly aligned with the Trump administration agenda in their specific agencies.
And Vaughn, I know you've been talking to White House officials, and they've been telling you and reiterating over and over again that they really want to root out waste and abuse. But what other rationale are we hearing from the White House, given the fact that we're now seeing thousands of terminations?
Right. I think that in the case of the Social Security Administration, I think that that is a worthy one to look at, because as you heard from Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary for the president, suggested they have not opened up the books yet they suspect they're going to find tens of millions of individuals who were inappropriately receiving funds despite being dead, when, as you noted, there is no evidence of this. And a lot of the claims when it comes to specific agencies that are being elevated, whether it be by Elon Musk on his social media platform or other allies of this presidential administration, so much of this is not transparent, and there are a few specifics in terms of evidence in what is a very massive federal government budget. And I think that this is where, from Caroline Leavitt to others working in the White House, they're consistently saying that they have empowered Elon Musk and his team to go and root out and identify the waste, fraud, and abuse that administrations prior to theirs have always said that they were going to do, but this time they're going to actually prove it and do it.
And just right next to you on that screen, we're showing images of Elon Musk. He, of course, is very closely associated with the DOGE team. But last night, something really striking happened, and that is that the White House is saying in court filings that Elon Musk is technically not the administrator of DOGE. So what more do we know about that, and what is the discrepancy here?
Right. In his executive order creating DOGE, which took over what was the U.S. Digital Service, which was another office inside of the executive office of the White House, there is this role that is called the administrator of it. Well, the assumption, I guess you could say, was that Elon Musk was technically playing that role because the White House has time and again said that he is the head of DOGE. Yet, what was acknowledged in this court filing, and then acknowledged by Caroline Leavitt, is that he is not the actual administrator, the head of DOGE. Instead, he is working as a special government employee, which we knew, but essentially he is a senior advisor, a special advisor to the president. But this also gets at the heart of where Caroline Leavitt just this afternoon was saying that the decisions that are actually being made are coming from the recommendation of Elon Musk and DOGE, but being executed by the secretaries of the respective departments or heads of the agencies. Of course, there is a lot to unpack with those statements here, but one of the key parts of the lawsuits that is currently in federal court is over Elon Musk's rather unusual powers within this White House, despite not even being now technically the head of the U.S. Digital Service, or DOGE, which had long been understood to actually be the case, which is now, according to their own court filings, not actually the case.
Yeah, certainly a lot to unpack. Of course, if we're talking about the courts, I got to come to you, Ryan. The Trump administration is now going before the Supreme Court for the first time on this issue when it comes to cuts. Walk us through the specifics on the firing of the Office of Special Counsel Director and what constitutional questions are at hand here.
Yeah, I mean, this could upset the order of, modern America, right, in terms of what you're talking about in terms of the firing of officials who typically go from administration to administration. And what Trump is trying to do here is sort of, wipe as many of those people out as I think he can and install his own folks into those offices. I think fundamentally what you're talking about is using these allegations, often unsupported by the evidence, of mass fraud. And it's sort of similar to the January 6th playbook that Trump ran when you're talking about making these claims of fraud and then being able to do things that, might go outside of the bounds of the law, ultimately, courts may decide, in terms of getting rid of a lot of these key figures. But a lot of these key figures, the Office of Special Counsel, are about waste, fraud, and abuse and eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse. The inspector generals that were all pushed out, those are individuals who are professionally trained and know how to look in to all of these issues and can actually look at the evidence and evaluate it factually and not just, be spreading misinformation on social media, making false claims about fraud that aren't supported by the facts and the evidence. And I think that's what you're ultimately, that's what the ultimate showdown that we have right now is these huge claims, these massive sweeping claims about fraud versus what's factually supported by the evidence. And I think that's what, we're going to see the Supreme Court, take this issue up, and the Trump administration argue that that's what this is all about, and sort of using that same allegations, similar to in the aftermath of the 2020 election, making these claims of mass fraud that often aren't supported by the facts.
Yeah, and Ryan, as you break down sort of the arguments that the Trump administration is making, I want to put up a line from the acting solicitor general's filing that caught our eye here. This court should not allow the judiciary to govern by temporary restraining order and supplant the judicial accountability the Constitution ordains. The executive branch takes seriously its constitutional duty to comply with the orders of Article 3 courts, and it has fulfilled that duty here. That's some pretty big talk to the Supreme Court. Why also pledging to comply with decisions of the federal court? So could you kind of unpack that for us? There's a lot there. What's the meat of this here?
Yeah, I mean, I think the argument is essentially that they want the executive to be the most powerful branch and don't really have too much regard for what is going on in the legislative branch or in the judicial branch. That's ultimately what they want to do here. They want to have as much power to do as much as possible and get rid of a lot of these officials. Just practically speaking, if you were talking about just completely wiping the decks every 4 years of everyone in the executive branch, that would be not a way for a government to be able to function. So it's a question of how far the Supreme Court's going to let them ultimately go here with these firings. But, I remember talking to Mike Fanone just a couple of days before all of the January 6th pardons came down, before Donald Trump took office. And, just about this notion of investing all of your hopes in the courts, being the one that sort of hold the line here. And, that's not ultimately how it worked out for him. Everyone who assaulted Mike Fanone is now back on the street. And that's sort of the attitude that I think he has, and a lot of folks have towards the courts at this time, whether or not there's going to be that line being held, or whether anyone in Congress is going to stand up for the co-equal, branches of government argument here.
Definitely some really important context there when you think of the courts. I want to talk timeline here. The deadline for the respondent to submit a filing is tomorrow. When should we expect the Supreme Court to rule on this issue?
And the timeline, it will depend on the Supreme Court. They sort of take those issues up. But obviously, this is an urgent one. So that's something that probably would get some really high priority from the court there.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Ryan. I want to now bring in Julia, because you're, of course, a little scoop machine here, a big scoop machine, I should say. Your latest exclusive, you reported that the Department of Homeland Security is preparing to fire hundreds of senior-level employees this week. And DHS is, of course, an agency with ICE and CBP, I should say, which we know is vital, really, to the president's goals when it comes to immigration. So why is he making these cuts if this is the agency literally that is like top priority for the thing that he wants to do most?
Yeah, it seems like the opposite of what they would want to do, right? Especially because they're already stretched thin and they're not able to deport and arrest as many migrants as Trump wants. We know he's been angry over that. What I'm told here, and this is by people who are involved in these decisions, is that they see this as short-term pain for long-term gain, that they see that there are people standing in the way of what they want to do. We really have to pull this apart from DOGE because we've already seen a lot of people, in fact, over 400 people be fired across DHS, mainly at FEMA, which you've reported on, CISA, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, and others. That started Friday. What's happening this week is a little different because they're going after people at a really high level of the government. It's a little wonky, but it's called Senior Executive Service. I'm sure you've heard of that. And then there's people who are GS-15. They're right below it. But basically, this would be like your colonels and your sergeants. These are people who are involved with policy and strategy. Sometimes they're in Washington, sometimes they're on the ground carrying out the mission of the agency. And these people have been identified by the Trump transition and then the DHS landing team, the people who went into DHS on day one. And they said, look, we don't think these people are in line with the mission here. They see them as standing in the way. And I'm told that they have a centralized list of people now that they want to get rid of across every single agency under DHS. And they want to replace them with people who they see as more loyal or more compliant.
So they want to replace them. Now, that's all going to take some time. So I wonder, in the short term, or maybe even in the long term, what's going to be the impact of them trying to carry out things like mass deportations, arrest of illegal immigrants, that again, the president says he wants to do?
Yeah, well, because it's one thing to get someone who's loyal, but it's quite harder to get someone who's competent, right? And these are really intricate, difficult issues, and especially to have someone with a law enforcement background who can pass a background check, that can be really hard. ICE already says it takes about 2 years to hire someone to work in their facilities. So what are they going to do about this? That's a big question. But as I understand it, they do think that they can fill some of these positions, or maybe they can do without them, or they can move people up who are in lower positions to these higher positions and basically fill it with people who they think are going to act more quickly and not ask any more questions. And as you know, there's also been a lot of suspicion from Tom Homan, the border czar, and other people at DHS who think that they have leakers in their midst. Even if people are just confirming some really basic information that used to be part of the relationship between the press and these agencies, now they don't want as much transparency into these inner workings. And so a lot of these people who might have been in press positions are now going to lose their jobs.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.